Are you tired of dying to delirium? Is visual clarity necessary for your build to survive? Well, it isn't anymore. Presenting your next build, the Immortal Man. Boasting 6 foot 10 inches, this man stands tall and ready to rumble. Those are 2 measurements. He doesn't believe in hiding his power thighs behind the mortal's invention of pants. Seeing what's going on is irrelevant. Blindfolded gameplay is even recommended for this glorious build. Why try and dodge mechanics when you can loot and swap gems in the heat of battle? Now that I've peppered you up, enjoy this footage of the Immortal Man taking on a full juice T16 60% delirious tower map while I break down the build bit by bit. This all started when GGG decided to nerf the Guardian. And by nerf, I mean buffed. It's now the best ascendancy on the map for survivability.
Are you serious?
And what I'm going to call the Guardian meta. Hear me out. Purposeful Harbinger increases aura effect on the player. Previously, a highly rare stat with powerful attributes. Now can be found in droves. With just 6 of these, every aura on you is multiplied by 4. This stat multiplies with the Guardian Ascendancy nodes. Because of the Guardian Ascendancies, they're actually considered auras. So you aren't getting 10% of mana granted as energy shield, you're getting 40% of mana granted as energy shield. With my build's 5k mana pool, that's 2000 flat ES. Who needs a mirror tier chest with 1000 ES when you can get 2000 ES from the mana within your thighs? Radiant Faith is also affected by the common increased effect of auras from your skills nodes on the tree, but multiplicatively with the previous aura stat I just mentioned. Behold this low infographic I made to illustrate the potency of the multiplicative nature of the 2 different aura stats. To help illustrate this, it works the same way as increased damage stat does interacting with a shocked enemy who has increased damage taken. A more multiplier, if you will. So Radiant Faith gives us 1% fizz reduction per aura. We have 8 auras, which gives us 8 fizz reduction and 1.6 regen. That gets multiplied by roughly 5 to 6 times, which gives us 8 to 10 regen and 40 to 48 fizz reduction. To compare this with a pathetic Jug, who has 7 endurance charges and only 28 flat base fizz reduction. Due to Unwavering Faith, Radiant Faith, and the purities of each specific element, this build reaches 90% fizz reduction and 90 max all res, and leaves us 0 need to get any resistance on gear, allowing us to cap chaos resistance easily. But it doesn't stop there. We also grab Malevolence for 100%-ish more damage over time and 100% increased skill effect duration, along with Haste for more speed and Discipline for more thick ES. The build gets more nasty though. Endbrinker enters the chat. And now, with 5 Heralds and only 6 notables on the tree, we have 700% increased damage. Between these 2 notables on a single jewel, any build you are making is now better as a Guardian. By basically copying my tree completely and switching your weapon, you want to play crit with precision? Aura, I'm just using to reserve more mana? Missing attacks? Never heard of her. You have 3000 to 4000 flat accuracy. You also get 300 to 400% increased crit chance. Oh, what's that behind you? An Animate Guardian with Kingmaker? Now you got 200 free crit multi. Congratulations, you are now a crit build without a single crit node allocated. You're welcome. Oh, did I forget to mention, without allocating attack speed, I have 74% increased attack speed, thanks to Haste, and I move fast? Don't get me started on Val Haste. Small side note, abusing this with party play is unethical, because most players don't have friends and would have to buy friends, introducing a pay-to-win system that no one could honestly support if they are an ethical gamer. There's one downside. Much like the line, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, for our build, what makes you stronger is also what will kill you. It's our kryptonite. And you may have already noticed I listed the Cirrus Death Cloud as an aura, or seen my character get frozen even though I'm wearing a Dream Fragments ring for freeze immunity. And that's because many debuffs and degens and ground effects are for some evil reason programmed to be considered auras. I never noticed this until now. Having any aura effect on me multiplied by 4 makes it very noticeable. For my playtime on this character, for the most part, they didn't start programming many debuffs and degens to be auras until the Cirrus fight and onwards with development of the game. So nothing really hurts us except these ground effects and debuffs. Most deadly of these are the Cirrus Clouds. These will freeze and degen you. Avoidable, but painful. Cirrus ground effects, which are probably the fastest degen you will hit. You still probably, if you had a log out macro, you still could log out fine. All the delirium debuffs pretty much instantly freeze you. The tar ground those zombies lay in the lab, those also freeze you. All the delirium debuffs pretty much instantly freeze the build. For the most part, this doesn't kill me, but occasionally if there's a large enough pack of monsters and they stack multiple of these freeze buffs, that can kill the build. But hasn't affected my leveling in Valid Red maps, only have died in super juiced delirious T16 maps, pushing build limits to the extreme. Oh, and Kosis? Screw Kosis. He is the hardest enemy you will face because most of his skills are auras, for who knows why. This build is still hardcore viable, I would say, as every time I have died, it's been a slow and painful death of a softcore player who could have logged out 5 times, but refused to give up on the dream. Any player playing hardcore with a logout macro, even a grandmother, should have enough reaction time to log out when you get frozen in a dangerous situation. Now let's get straight into gear and jewels. To start off, considering we are going low life, the obvious choice is Chevron's Wrappings, am I right? Wait a second, I ain't rich for this. The obvious choice, let me rephrase that, is to be a complete Chad and go thrift shopping for a 6-link Solaris Lorica. It's beautiful. Now, on a non-comical note, Solaris Lorica is actually a better defensive option due to its mod that gives 25% reduced chaos damage taken over time. This is because out of all our damage reduction categories, chaos is our weakest resistance, and the deadliest thing to us is in fact chaos aura degens, which this chest mitigates heavily. For our offense, no question, Chevron's Wrappings will give us more ES and thus more damage, but you won't look like a complete Chad with no pants and no fears. Next up is our shield, the Prism Guardian, appropriately named, I might add. This shield allows us to reserve our life much more effectively, given socketed skills now use blood magic. This is because blood magic has a 1.97-ish mana multiplier, which makes reserving life with blood magic much more costly. With this shield, we don't have that multiplier, and on top of that, it has 25% reduced mana reservation, so we can reserve our most expensive auras quite cheaply and efficiently with our life. Also, this shield gives 2 levels to socketed gems, which makes those auras that much better, and the resistances don't hurt, but without them we are still LE weakness capped easily. Our amulet has 5% reduced mana reserve mod. This can be found on Shaper or Redeemer amulets. Ideally you want that mod plus some mana plus increased ES in this mod, but my particular amulet I found in the trash can discarded outside the back of a Wendy's. For our helmet and gloves, we use Breath Stealer and Crown of the Inward Eye. Breath Stealer for allocating Charisma, and Crown of the Inward Eye for its increased ES life and mana mod, along with Transfiguration of Mind, which is a significant damage boost. If you can't afford to anoint Charisma because it's 2 golden oils, use an Alpha Zal instead of the Inward Eye, and anoint a high increased maximum mana node instead that is cheap. For our rings, we use Dream Fragments for mana and freeze immunity, because being a 1k-ish life build under our 10k ES, everything will freeze us. Our second ring, we grab as much as possible mana and chaos res. Int is also great for more mana and increased energy shield. For our belt, it's going to be a Stygian Vise, which is our best in slot due to being able to grab an Eye Jewel with chaos res and mana, again going for mana and chaos res on the belt. For our boots, we want to grab int, mana, move speed, chaos res, and dex if you need dex for dex requirement stuff. Lastly, for our scepter, we grab a scepter with damage over time multi, fire damage over time multi, and mana. Only upgrade the scepter could really have is increased fire damage as a prefix. Lastly, for gearing our flasks, the mandatory one is a life flask with burn removal. Next up, for damage, you want a Witchfire. There's nothing that's going to beat it for damage really for us because we're not applying a curse because we have too many socketed gems. Next up, besides that, is a Sulfur Flask, Onslaught Flask, because they're good for regen and for clear speed. Also, I'd recommend a Quicksilver with Adrenaline. With these flasks, you also want to pick up Bleed Immunity, Curse Immunity, and if you're playing hardcore, I'd probably recommend dropping Adrenaline for Shock Immunity. You may have noticed the gearing on this build is pretty cheap, as most of the items are 1 chaos, but it will get a bit more expensive, unfortunately. When it comes to the cluster jewels, for our cluster jewels we use 6 jewels with Purposeful Herald and Endbringer, and 1 jewel with Purposeful Herald and Heraldry. To begin with, unless you are rich, don't buy these overpriced cluster jewels. These jewels can be made consistently for roughly 300 alterations plus regals / scours. I made all 7 of my medium cluster jewels roughly for 2,000-ish alterations plus regals and scours. While I was making them, I made money by selling extra jewels I didn't need that landed rare affix combinations. To do this most efficiently, use alterations on magic, medium cluster jewels with the enchant mod of 4 passives plus increased damage while affected by a herald. Roll these until you see a mod that says Heraldry, Endbringer, or Purposeful Harbinger. If the mod is by itself, use an Orb of Augmentation, which will usually land 1 jewel socket. If it does not land a jewel socket, you keep rolling alterations. If you see these mods without a jewel socket but a different suffix, you keep rolling. Once you have successfully hit one of these notables with a jewel socket, you then regal. If you hit one of the notables again, you have a jewel that sells for fat stacks of cash or is the jewel you need for your build. Side note, if you hit the notable, I forget the name of it right now, but if it's the one with +1 base crit, that is also probably sellable for a profit based on the base cost of your jewel. This build also makes use of the Voices Cluster Jewel. These are currently overpriced by a boatload. I believe once more progress Atlas has happened for the vast majority of the player base, they'll become quite a common jewel and probably drop in price significantly, unless enough people start following my build guide, in which case, I don't know. If you can't afford the jewel though, I'd recommend just crafting these large jewels, which I'm about to explain to you. To craft these large jewels, you simply need to find the large cluster jewel with 8 passives enchant and the lightning damage enchant. This is solely so we can roll for Scintillating Idea and Notable that gives 20% increased mana. If you decide to make this build except a hit-based version, you can also roll a extremely powerful Wrath, Anger, or Aura effect mod, in which case you'd want to hit that as well. So when you're rolling these jewels, I recommend just using alchemies and scours. Side note, I forgot to mention, these need to be item level 75 jewels to roll 2 jewel sockets. So you scour them until you hit Scintillating Idea, 2 jewel sockets, and another random notable. This is so that one of our travel nodes to the jewel socket will be Scintillating Idea, thus allowing us to pick up another 20% increased mana on a travel node. Lastly, for jewels, and these I bet will become very expensive if this build gets popular. Grab Split Personality with +5 mana and +5 int. These jewels allocated in the jewel sockets on our farthest cluster give us anywhere between 52 to 57 mana and intelligence each. You thought Grand Spectrum used to be good? These are better. GGG doesn't know how to nerf something because they literally just buffed Guardian across the board, considering these jewels as well. Now after these clips finish, I'm going to go in game to show you how to spec the passive tree and the gem links I use. I actually forgot to go over this, but real quick, very important, Pantheon. You want to get Soul of Aracali, one for the 5% reduced damage taken from damage over time. That's very nice for against those big Chaos degens or other degens that are out there. Also, you need to get the Great Untangle capture. This is a jungle map. You use a Divine Vessel, and you can get 50% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield. This is the reason, or part of the thing for why life flasks are mandatory. So basically, whenever we're taking a ton of damage by just many mobs, for the most part, nothing really kills us, but if you really are getting just jumped on by freaking everything, maybe you'll want to regen. Press 1. All of a sudden you've stopped taking damage over time, which procs 50% increase rate of life and recovery, or life and energy shield, which basically, boom, you're regenning a ton, you're back up to full, you're fine, not even hurt. Also, in combination with this, we use Soul of Ryslotha. This is just so in long boss fights we have unlimited uses of our life flask to keep turning off Righteous Fire. If it gets hectic, it gets hairy. You wait 4 seconds and then it'll start regenerating like 3 life flasks every 3 seconds. And that, for the most part, will keep your life flask full, so you can keep using it whenever you need to in very dangerous situations. That's the gist of it. Now that we're in game, I'm going to go over gems I use and the links regarding those gems. So to start off with, we are a Righteous Fire build. This is our 6-link setup. We have Righteous Fire linked to Arcane Surge, which is basically all it's doing for us is making it so Swift Affliction can support Righteous Fire. If you can, get Awaken Swift Affliction and 20 quality it. That's way better damage than regular Swift Affliction because it gives 10% damage over time multiplier. Next up is Elemental Focus. Then Burning Damage. You want Awakened Burning Damage for this as well. The 20 quality gives another 10 multi for us. And lastly, gem swap between increased area AoE, and conk effect. Conk effect for a single target, AoE for clearing through maps. Now I will say this, if you're rolling a Solaris Lorica for getting the color sockets you want to do a 2 blue craft. This is a pretty, this chest I think has like, I don't know, a 30 to 50 dex or strength craft or something, or like requirement. So it is it does have a preference towards red gems, but it is still pretty easy to roll off colors because it's such a low requirement and such a low level item. So basically when you're crafting it, you want to do the 2 blue recipe. If you get 4 blue, 2 red, stop. That actually is a little bit higher damage, I believe. If you go with, instead of Swift Affliction and Arcane Surge, you drop this, and instead you, with your second red, you go with Inspiration Support along with, which one am I forgetting? Efficacy. If you throw those 2 in, I think that might be a little bit higher damage. But if you do that, you have to be generating inspiration charges with your flame dash, so you'd have to drop portal here, and you'd put inspiration here. So that way, inspiration would actually be a good damage modifier. But otherwise, if you can get 4 blue, 1 green, 1 red, this is also pretty strong damage support setup. This would be fine to stop this way and run with it. Next up we have is Orb of Storms, Flame Dash, Portal. This is linked to nothing. This is Orb of Storms for applying EE. This is Flame Dash for moving around when we need to jump over things. And Portal is just for, I hate carrying around portal scrolls. Next up we have Purity of Ice, Herald of Ice, Scorching Ray, Herald of Thunder. So with this build, the more heralds you get, the more aura effect you get, the more damage you get. I ended up having to only do 4 heralds because if you have both Herald of Purity and Herald of Ash, you cannot use EE, which is the biggest damage multiplier for Righteous Fire. So unfortunately, I had to be not as busted and not get as insane of a boost out of the Herald jewels, but still a very strong boost nonetheless. If you are rolling a hit build, you'll want all 5 heralds. That'll be maximum DPS. But for a degen build, you want Elemental Overload, and therefore it doesn't work with some heralds. Like if you're a cold dot build, you can't pick up Herald of Ice because it'll add cold damage to your spells. Moving on, we have Purity of Fire, Herald of Agony, Blood Magic support with Purity of Lightning. You can attach it to any of the purities. You'll just need 1 Blood Magic support, and it'll need to be attached to one of the purities. And you'll need it to be, I think, at least level 19 or 18, or you'll reserve too much life. For the Blood Magic support, that is. Next up we have our Prism Guardian. This is where we want to put our heaviest mana reservation jewels. So we put our Haste in here, our Discipline, and our Malevolence. We put Discipline, it's a 35, same with the Purities, but we get benefit out of the extra 2 levels, because with the Purities, we hit 90 max res easily. Getting more levels for Purities does nothing for us, so you want to put Discipline in here for just a lot more ES, more or less, for the extra 2 levels. Next up we have Animate Guardian, Herald of Ash. The funny thing is, I threw this Animate Guardian in the build pretty early on because it's somewhat busted. This thing right here, I have a Leer cast on it, a Dying Breath, the Goat Hide Boots, the Victorio's Flight. So you'll notice, let me just unsummon him real quick. So say I go over to defense, I look at my movement speed. Movement speed modifier is 56. I summon this guy, all of a sudden it's 94, because his Victorio's Flight don't just give me like 10 movement speed, they give me like 40 or whatever, right? So I initially had him in the build, but frankly I killed him twice doing really hard content. I gave up on having him in there. You can try to work this in if you can figure out a way to keep him alive, but more or less I decided I was tired of micromanaging it and tired of buying 1C uniques to make my build that much better, and gave up on the Herald, or on the Guardian. Later on I might invest into getting him better stuff to keep him alive, like the Mask of the Stitch Demon. Next up we have Precision. Out of these 2, Clarity and Precision, these are basically, you're using these 2 jewels to get as close to the lowest mana reserve possible while you can still cast spells. You want to level up Precision as much as possible, and then Clarity for whatever extra levels you need to get it closer to lowest mana reserve possible, or highest mana reserve possible, while still being able to cast spells. Because Precision gives you crit, which makes you proc Elemental Overload more often, which is crit strike chance if you've dealt a critical strike recently. So I believe that brings us to the end of the jewel sockets. I don't know if I showed this in the video, but you want a jewel that looks like this for your Stygian Vise, Chaos Resist, Mana. Showed all the gear at this point. Now let's go over the passive tree. So to start off with, we are the Guardian, also known as the most OP ascendancy ever, in my opinion, at this point in this state of the game. First off, you grab Radiant Faith and Unwavering Faith. These two nodes are huge for ES, they're huge for defenses. They're what make you basically immortal. Next up, you grab Bastion of Hope. This basically makes you stun immune. Without this, you start to get stunned a lot because you have 1500 life. Pretty much all the white mobs will stun you. If you have this, you don't get stunned more or less because you're pretty much always blocking within the last 10 seconds. Also, if you're playing with teammates, it's nice for them because they get extra block chance and they get stun immunity as well. So very fun for party play, you know, if you have friends. Next up, you have Time of Need. This is great for basically more regen, more sustain on your ES pool. Very strong. So, to go over the layout, more or less, this is what I optimized for and planned out, is to take most efficient use of the split personality jewels. I tried to path kind of in a somewhat weird way, but it's still, frankly, about just as efficient. I could have gone this way here and over here, but that would have saved me like a passive or two and I wouldn't get Sanctity. But going this way, I grab a ton more length on my longest string to these jewels, which makes it so I get 52, 52, 55, 55, and 57, 57, which is absolutely huge. Now looking at the cluster jewels we're grabbing, it starts off, you grab basically a large cluster jewel like this with Scintillating Idea. If Scintillating Idea is over here, you basically need to re-roll the jewel until you get it to land here or here, so that way it's along your travel nodes, just so you can get that mana. I mentioned this before, but if you're a hit build, there's a aura effect thing that you could get along here. Possibly you're a lightning build, maybe you want the lightning damage pen thing here, so that's stuff you want to look for when rolling a large jewel. Next up you have just the standard jewels, which are basically all these bad boys that have Heraldry, Purposeful Harbinger. You only use one of these, and then the other ones are all going to be Endbringer and Purposeful Harbinger for the damage. For the jewel sockets, you socket in all of these. You'll need one Conqueror's Efficiency. If you can get this with 1% reduced mana reserve, that would be absolutely magnificent. Besides that, you're basically picking up mana, ES, and Chaos Resistance. That's pretty much what I picked up on all my random jewels. You'll see I have 1% reduced mana reserved. This is one of my crappy jewels, but it's good because I needed that 1% reduced mana reserve to make all of my auras work out. Again, I have Energy Shield mana, Chaos Resistance. The cold resistance on that one does not matter. Again, mana, Energy Shield, area damage, which is nice, and then this one had Dex. So a lot of this problem I ended up trying to correct for Dex because I needed Dexterity for a few things like Malevolence. Malevolence requires you to have 68 Dex. There's other things like Haste. If you can get your Dex higher and higher, you can have a pretty good Haste, which makes you move really fast. So wherever you can, like jewels is a good place to pick up Dex because you're just going for mana and Energy Shield and Chaos Resistance. That leaves you an extra suffix for Dex. Split personality jewels. Lastly, I will say I'm going to upload the POB for this, but one of the straight upgrades I'm going to do on this character when I get a better amulet that I didn't find in the trash can at a Wendy's is to allocate this node down here, Champion of the Cause. I'm going to allocate Champion of the Cause. I'm going to unspec out of these, go up here, 1, 2, get Dreamer, because I have Dreamer right here now allocated, and then I'll have an extra node to basically put into mana or Energy Shield somewhere. I haven't really decided where I'm going next, but that's the gist of it. This is the passive tree. You're picking up basically mana reserve nodes, increased aura effect nodes, stuff like that, and you're just traveling to the most efficient nodes possible. You'll see I do end up grabbing these fire damage over time multi nodes because we don't have a lot of fire damage over time multi because we're putting more stuff into these cluster jewels and we don't have time to go over to here or to growth and decay. Oh, side note, growth and decay would also be a strong allocation for right here if you wanted to keep this. Frankly, I might end up doing that. I forgot this was a thing over here. I might end up going for that because that's a very strong node for damage. So that's the gist of the passive tree. I will leave a path of building so you can try to copy it best yourself. If not, just go back to this video, kind of review what I've shown you here. That's the gist of it. Just remember when you're getting heralds, you either need to not have Herald of Ash or not have Herald of Purity. Just one or the other, because otherwise you will mess up your EE, which is half your damage. So that's just the build. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I've been really working on improving my editing skills and coming up with more creative and cool, interesting off-meta builds. I hope you guys like it. If you do, leave a like or subscribe Anyways, that's kind of the gist of it. Captain Lance out. Have a good one, guys.